Welcome back to the podcast. We are here with return guest for the third time, John F. Kennedy Jr. from CandorPath.com. John is a certified financial planner, but he's so much more. He's a podcaster. Him and his company have a new podcast, which we are excited to talk about. So as we're jumping in, John, how the heck have you been? And what should we all be thinking about these first couple of minutes of our interview today?
Robert, thanks for the intro, man. Well, life has definitely changed. I think the first time we did the podcast together, just so you know, I don't know if you even know this, you were the first show I was ever a guest on. Did you know that?
Nice. I had no idea. You're natural.
Oh, well, I mean, I enjoy it. And I know you always joke, like I was the person who liked podcasts so much that I wanted to be a guest on a podcast.
Yeah.
And so yours was the first show I did. I think fast forward, I don't know, now there's like 50 or something. And we have our own show called Above Board with Candor Path, which we'll talk about as well throughout this. But no, life is good. We're all obviously dealing with interesting and challenging times since the start of the pandemic. But I have a son as well now, so I have a 2 and a 5-year-old, and our business is growing. I think the last time I was on the show, it was just myself and my business partner. Now we're a team of 5, which is just like wild to think about that we've gone from 2 to 5 people in that short amount of time.
Fantastic. Well, so many life changes. And I remember like when we first were speaking, there was a lot of discussion about the importance of being organized, as boring as that is when you're not in a crisis. But then as you go through different crises throughout your lives and you get up to a certain age, being organized kind of becomes fun and you end up feeling better, especially when people are depending on you in any sense. Like you said, having an extra baby or having these extra employees, when it's just you and you're young and you're flying by the seat of your pants, the adventure can be fun. But at a certain point, then you have to maybe jump into, I don't know if like it's an accountant mindset, but whenever I talk to like an accountant, CPA kind of person, they're like, set this money aside for this. We'll think about this 2 years in the future. And when I was younger, I didn't get it. I thought that people like that were like super boring and someone that shouldn't be listened to. But now I'm like, hey, maybe people like you who plan ahead, who think ahead, who have things in different boxes, maybe people like you are onto something.
Well, we're all a work in progress. And what I would say, though, instead of organization, I'll parlay that into a different word, which is discipline. Because I think like having that level of if we're talking about one's financial life or their career, whatever, having like a level of organization, to me, like as I hear you say that, it kind of translates to discipline, like making sure that you're doing the mundane routine things that even sometimes don't feel good, like saving X percent per month, so like let's correlate that back to finances, having your budget in place and following those rules that you create for yourself. For me anyway, it creates some level of sanity when there's chaos going around you. There's all these things in life that you can't control. We've all been dealing with, to different degrees, what's happened since March of 2020 or February of 2020 when the pandemic began. And so that's really difficult if you're disorganized. Like if you were already going into that disorganized and chaotic and not disciplined, that makes it even harder. And again, like I said, we're work in progress over here. So, like it's not like I've got it figured out, but relying on some of those rules, I think could help make that journey a little bit easier when we're dealing with times of chaos and things that we can't control. What do you think?
I mean, I agree completely. If it was possible to more than agree, I would. And you always hear about that saying of like there's motivation and there's discipline, and people wait for motivation to strike, but that's so unreliable. It comes and goes. You might be waiting 6 months for one little ping of motivation to show up. Whereas, like you said, if you have these rules, if you say, I plan on showing up and I'll show up, there is something to that. And then it seems like that discipline muscle gets stronger as you use it. And like when we first met, we met a few minutes ago for this interview, we joked a little bit about how like I think we'd planned to meet a few weeks ago and a few months ago, and something happened here and there. And what happened now is I kind of slipped a little bit with the time management. I was watching the baby, but even a few years ago, I might have seen something on my calendar, like an appointment such as this, and I might have said, I don't feel like showing up to that podcast interview, and I'll make up some excuse and I'll cancel. And we've all been there. But if you make up an excuse once, it's easier to do it again and again. And next thing you know, you're in that panic mode, you're scrambling, and then that's just no good place to be. So there's something to be said about having the rules, having the discipline. And even if maybe you kind of don't feel like it. Well, do you really hate it? Are you really looking to avoid it? Well, no, it's just like you're just a little bit not feeling like showing up to these appointments. So there's definitely something to be said for that sort of simplicity and just going ahead and doing what it is that you planned ahead of time, setting aside the money, whatever in whatever context.
Yeah, this is a weird shift to what you just said, but my business partner Matt Marcoux always talks about, um, when things are hard, life is chaotic around you. He'll say to himself, he'll say to me, "Hey, at the end of the day, we're professionals and we have to get it done." And it's his way of saying. And part of me thinks we've heard this on your show. I mean, we listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to all your shows, and I feel like a guest probably said this at some point in the last couple of years. But where we got this from was listening to someone tell their story, like they were a surgeon, and or they were using the example of a surgeon. And it's like, what if the surgeon wakes up that morning, orthopedic surgeon does, knee surgeries and hip surgeries, all that stuff. What if he wakes up that morning or she wakes up that morning and says, yeah, I don't feel like doing the surgery today. Well, you can't, that's not an option. Like you got to, even when mentally you're dealing with stuff, like you have to be able to set that aside and say, I'm a professional and I have to honor these commitments and I got to do this stuff. And I think for us, that's like kind of a mantra that we tell ourselves a lot too, because during the day, I mean, listen, it's been weird. I went from meeting with every client that we serve face to face in our office to doing nothing but Zooms like this. And that was a hard transition at first. And if anybody listening to this, like we all know what happened in March of 2020. And we talk about like financial uncertainty and financial anxiety. I mean, the markets dropped 35% in 3 weeks. That is a historic drop. We've never seen the markets fall as fast and as hard in that short period of time. And so lots of financial anxiety, lots of conversations to have. And it'd be easy in those moments to go, gosh, I can't. We were meeting with clients on Saturdays and Sundays. And it would be easy to go, I'm too tired. I can't do this. But we had to kind of give ourselves that mantra and say, like, we're professionals. That's the expectation. We have a meeting set. We have to honor it. Now, it's a completely different circumstance when there's babies involved and we're lacking sleep. I think at some point there's like the perfect concoction for it being okay every now and again. So I think, Robert, you got to give yourself a little slack on that one.
Yeah, and you mentioned babies and things like that, and I think it like I'm a first time father. I only plan on having the one baby, but those first few months were so difficult as we were figuring out like the time management, like me and the wife, and who would do what. And you and I even spoke a few minutes ago, like before the call, just about how things change almost every couple of weeks, and there's different phases of your life, and it could be chaotic if you don't see the bigger picture. And if you don't have a plan and if you don't adjust, and there's been a little bit of adjustment with the time management. But the thing that I wasn't expecting at all about parenting was I'm excited to change this kid's diaper. Like I always thought there would be such a long list of things I would hate about being a dad and things that were gross and cleaning out the diaper pail and, clean, like bathing him after he pees or something like that. But there's just so many things that I enjoy doing. And I think that it's helped to tap into some of those things. And even you mentioned things like the money anxiety. When I started this podcast that we're on about 5-6 years ago, I was in a mental state where if a bill came in the mail, I would be afraid to even open the envelope. And it sounds so silly to talk about, but like I would let a couple of bills pile up, and I wouldn't let things go late, but just like I would have a little spot where I just dreaded looking at it and I feared opening it up. And then I would say like, okay, do I rip the Band-Aid off and open up all these bills and, see what the tax hit is for this quarter or things like that. And I would just like wonder, like, should I open up all the bills at once or kind of space out the pain throughout the week? Or should I wait till Friday? And I tried all these things. And now like I look forward to looking at money kind of issues when a bill comes in. I'm like, great, what is it? How can I pay it? I look at my bank account every day just to kind of see where things are at. And it seems silly to like think back about the money anxiety, but like, I mean, I can relate to some of that, of like just being afraid to even look or even know what the truth is. And like in hindsight, it's like that only hurts yourself, but it's like such a hard thing to get out of emotionally.
Wow, Robert. Yeah, you speak to a situation. I'm glad you shared that because that speaks to a situation that I think so many people deal with. That money anxiety, fear of opening that bill, even though like roughly speaking, you kind of know what's on the other side of that when you open it, but it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And so many people so many people just you do that. You get in the habit of just saying out of sight, out of mind, I'll deal with this later. I'll deal with this next month. I'll deal with this next month. And what happens when we do that? Like you have an option to either lean into a situation, learn more about it and try to get better at it, or you kind of avoid and ignore it. And when you do that, you're like, it's almost destined that you're never going to get better at it if you continue to do that. And so at some point, I imagine, I don't know exactly what the impetus was, but at some point you took the bull by the horns and you realized like, okay, I can't live my life. Like I can't be in fear of every time I get a bill. I can't be afraid. And so with proper planning and thinking ahead and being disciplined, I mean, that's huge. We have one of our episodes that we did on Above Board with Candor Path is it's called When It Comes to Your Budget, You Don't Want to Fudge It, which is super silly, I know. But it's, we talk about that. And what's kind of cool about it is, my business partner and I are both certified financial planners. But we have someone, his name's Rich, and his social media header or his name on social media is The Rich B. And this is kind of funny, like side story, but he's a verified, you can tell me if I'm saying this wrong, like a verified influencer. Like he's verified on some social media platforms like TikTok, and he's on Instagram and YouTube. But he's just got such a cool perspective of it because he's non-financial related. So he's asking us these questions and we're having like this really engaging dialogue. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about, our business partnership. Sometimes, we've talked about all sorts of just challenges that we're seeing as we're growing and trying to learn and develop. But anyway, it's a cool conversation to talk with someone who comes from it from a non-financial point of view. And we have that dialogue where, like you said, it's something, there's an impetus there, something has to happen. And you realize like, okay, I got to develop this level of organization and discipline with my money.
Yeah. And so what you're explaining there, it kind of makes me think of, if someone out there has this money anxiety or some money issue, like listening to a podcast such as what you guys put out, it's kind of like a safe place to get some answers and even get some things answered that maybe people aren't even asking about. Because I thought about, there's been so many years when I've been almost ashamed to ask my accountant this or that. And then when I talk to like people who are accountants, but not my accountant, they say, oh yeah, it's no problem to email your accountant like something in December or in November and just like ask them about something ahead of time. But I'm always afraid of looking stupid or asking the wrong thing or just like just messing up in some way. And so like listening to a podcast and hearing about some of these things, like about like the importance of having a budget and how to do it, or some of these kind of beginner, newbie, non-expert questions. I imagine that it can kind of get people more educated, maybe not right away, but slowly, and maybe a few minutes a day or one episode a week or something, and slowly get up to speed so that dealing with the money issues and talking to the CPA or the accountant does not have to be scary anymore. Maybe not instantly, but over time, as we're saying, we're like kind of when you were kind of describing that a minute ago, I was thinking in terms of like, well, maybe things are either like slightly up or slightly down, right? Either things are slowly on the downward spiral and things are slowly getting worse. I'm avoiding the bills, I'm not budgeting, or maybe there's a little bit of money left over at the end of the month, at the end of the year, and it can slowly be like, slowly improving. And that's just what comes to mind as far as like the advantages of listening to a financial podcast is digging into these topics as kind of a passive listener. So we still get where we need to go, but without the problems of looking stupid or asking the wrong thing.
Yeah, there's always progress to be made, and we're works in progress as well. It hurts my heart when I hear someone say, because I've heard that a lot, Robert. Actually, I hear someone tell me, I kind of feel silly asking you this question, but and then they ask it, and for me, it's like, no, time out. That's we all heard growing up like there's no such thing as a stupid question, but in that context, it's true. Like, how do you ever get better? How do you ever evolve or understand finances better if we're afraid to face those questions and ask those things? And I do think what's good about, Rich, as he kind of moderates the conversation with us, is it's easy in our industry to kind of get caught up with like financial jargon and stuff like that. And although we try to be very intentional about not making things confusing and talking about super boring stuff like standard deviation and the beta of a portfolio, and that's not fun. He's just really good at helping us, just asking those questions and looking at it from the standpoint of, hey, I'm a non-financial expert. This isn't my world, but I know what budgeting means and I want to get better at it. And then, kind of ask that question. So I get what you're saying, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people do feel that way, and I feel that way about stuff that's not financial related. Medical stuff, maybe seeing a doctor, whatever. Sometimes it's like, hey, this is a dumb question, but I need to ask. I feel that way in different areas too, and no one should. Like, we shouldn't have to feel like that. Yet, we do. And who knows? I mean, part of that might just be this like social media world we live in, where we see people on social media and they're like, wow, they look like they have it, they're financially free and they've got cars and homes and they've got all this stuff together. And I'm over here trying to figure out how to pay my next bill properly, or make sure that I don't, have to owe more interest than I thought I would. We're all works in progress. And I think behind the scenes, no one's really perfect. And accepting that is probably a big step in the right direction. Like, Robert, what for you was, how did you finally overcome those questions and say like, no, this is fine. Like, I can ask these questions to my accountant. What was it for you?
I think a lot of it was getting to know him over a number of years. And like at first he like blew me away with like, he seemed to be a way smarter guy than compared to the person I was using before. And he seemed to be a lot more on the ball. And I think just at some point, I kind of had the mindset of, I think one of those years I came in and I said, can you just give me a couple of tips? Can you just give me like a few of the first steps, like starting from the very beginning, like tell me about like what a 1040 is, or tell me about, like what a W-2 is, or things like that. And I said, can you just drip out just for this tax year, a couple of things, knowing that maybe next year will give me a couple of other things. And it was a little bit painful, but I had it in my head that like, it's okay to not get a perfect score, and it's okay to have a conversation with someone, and they don't, like, everyone doesn't need to be blown away or super impressed every time they have a conversation with you. It's okay to just have a boring, mundane, everyday conversation where you ask a couple of beginner questions. And then I think, and for some reason too, like, I think just at some point I was okay even like mentioning like names of things, and maybe it was like an age thing, but like when I was in my early 20s, I felt like I was just like playing around. Like I said, well, I have this business entity, and I was afraid to even say like, this business entity is called JumpX LLC, and this business entity is called Double Agent Marketing LLC. I felt like I was like playing around, and I was afraid of even mentioning like these goofy business names. I thought I was just kind of like pretending to be a businessman. And so maybe it was like those two things of not, like three things, like saying, just drip out a couple of tips for me, not obsessing over the perfect score, and then saying it, and then being okay with saying names and saying numbers. And even if like the yearly income was not what I was proud of that particular year, I'd say like, I'm saying it out loud. Here's what the name is. Here's what the number is. So I think a lot of it was just getting everything on the table, getting everything above board, instead of like picking and choosing what to say and what to be honest about, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, kudos to you for being able to overcome that. I do hope that, I mean, your show's the same way as our podcast. Like, I feel like it helps empower business owners and entrepreneurs to be able to listen, and maybe there are questions that they're thinking about that they might think is silly, but now they can digest this through a conversation that, as you have other entrepreneurs and business owners on your show, or vice versa. I think that's what's so helpful. And honestly, like it's from the standpoint of our show with Above Board with Candor Path, it's just three business owners and entrepreneurs sharing their stories about business partnership, how to develop discipline, how to get better. So there's a lot of money related components to it, because that's sort of, that's our expertise and that's what it lends to. But we're all dealing with the same challenges that anybody listening to this is. So it's just kind of an open platform to be able to have that conversation. So kudos to you for your show as well. I mean, you guys, you've been doing this. What number are we today? I mean, you have so many shows. It's just incredible to me. It's an inspiration.
I think we're 816.
Whoa, that's wild.
And it's like, it didn't happen overnight, and it's like a stick with it. And I felt like quitting so many times, but then kind of like you said at the beginning of our conversation, like why quit? You come this far, and why not just like put some of these things in motion? And so yeah, like, and what you've kind of explained there was it can be helpful to maybe jump into the randomness, right? You tune into a podcast, you listen to a conversation, and you just kind of see what happens. And I think it's really important to be curious and not count yourself out, and not say, well, I'm not going to listen to that accounting podcast or that money podcast because I'm not in that field. Well, there are still things that you need to know. If I mean, money's just a part of your life, and either you can control it or it can control you. And so I like how you explain, like, there's that format with you and your business partner, and then the guy Rich in the middle, kind of dumbing it down for the rest of us. And so we can all jump in and enjoy the randomness. And I mean, you can imagine the wide variety of guests that we have on the show. Like, even sometimes I don't know what they're talking about. Like yesterday, I talked to a COVID-19 expert, and I was just asking the dumb beginner questions, but I'm maybe simplifying it for everyone else. And what's the point of living in the jargon and all the advanced stuff if no one even understands that you're just hiding behind a black box? And so this podcast, the Above Board with Candor Path, you mentioned a couple of interesting topics. And so is there a favorite episode that you have so far, or is there like a question that you've covered on your podcast that like really stands out that we should all be asking ourselves this question about money? Anything like that?
Yes. So a couple of things. The first one I want to say is you are the ultimate testament of discipline, like having as many number 816, like, and you said there's been so many times you want to quit. Like, your show is the true testament of like, this is what discipline looks like, grinding through it. But as it relates to our show, there's a handful, and some are more recent that stick out to me. This one that I really like, it doesn't have anything to do with money specifically, but it's called Lessons in Business Partnership. So in this conversation, Rich is interviewing my business partner, Matt, and I about how we formed our business partnership, how we came to that. And the reason that I feel passionate about this topic is because there are so many people out there that are anti-business partnership. I mean, I can't tell you how many folks I spoke with leading into that decision that counseled me not to go into business. They didn't know Matt. They just said, like, don't get a business partner. It's a bad idea. It sort of feels like universal knowledge that, business partnerships are destined to fail. And I want to be, I guess a voice of positivity in the direction that business partnerships can really help you leverage and grow in a more meaningful way. Especially if you're someone that like loves the idea and the element of having a team atmosphere, and 1 + 1 = 3. Like, our powers combined can help us output a greater effort for, in our case, the community of clients that we work with, than if we were doing it alone. And I don't know about you, but like, that's just everybody I know has a negative slant towards business partnerships. Whereas this conversation is, hey, there's positive things too, and there's pros and cons, and those are, everyone's situation is different, and you have to like make your own decision, but at least being able to hear from someone from a more positive perspective in that way. And then, there's another one that we did recently called The Sentient Life, where we interviewed a guest who is traveling with his entire family. So 2 children, his wife, and 2 dogs. For the next year, they are touring the United States. And they're renting their home. They left their home and they're staying at Airbnbs, and they're touring the US. And the whole conversation is about disconnecting to find awareness. He's a business owner. He runs 3 or 4 different businesses, and he's working remotely, but he realized during COVID, like, it was, that same level of anxiousness we started talking about with the show. Like, he was feeling like, I can't go anywhere with my family. I can't go to a theme park. I can't go, we're trapped inside. And he wanted to get out and do something different with his family and create these memories and these moments. And so the whole conversation is about disconnecting to find awareness. So there's a lot of good nuggets in our shows. Those are 2 good ones that are actually non-financial related and peppered throughout. We have, as we're recording this, we have 25 episodes. So, peppered throughout that, there are a ton of money conversations as well, budgeting, cash flow as business owners, stuff like that. But just like you said, man, talking about this stuff, that's what's so important. And just, being able to share our experiences. I think that's what's so great about podcasting.
And what I like about podcasting is the randomness. Like, how many different little random sidebars have you and I gotten into? And I feel like that's kind of made the educational part of it kind of add some entertainment, right? It's not
Yeah.
all just the facts and figures. It's not all just step 1 to step 50. Sometimes there's the randomness in there, so that we're not always 24 hours a day feeling like we're back at school. You can listen to a podcast and kind of kick back, but then you'll get some of these really helpful tips and like ideas and strategies that kind of work their way in, kind of without you even realizing, right? And so you tune into this money podcast, and it gets into all these other kind of things that maybe you might not even ask yourself these questions about traveling in an RV, but it's one of those things that having your money figured out could lead to. And from what I've been getting a lot from just the way we've been talking is you seem like such a positive person, John, and like with the encouragement and the compliments, and it's so easy to do. But so many people just forget to do it, right? So many people just get caught up in the negativity and looking for the bad about things. And can I insult this, or can I come up with a reason why this won't work? And so that's kind of what I've been getting from talking to you today is why not just make that little bit of extra effort. And if you like something someone did or something someone said, why not just say that positive thing? And so I'm getting an idea of some of these cool topics, both like random and on topic of what you have on this podcast. And I mean, I was just talking to get into a little bit more randomness as we get to these final minutes here. I was talking to the wife just last night about Chris Farley and David Spade, right? And they had a really kind of a brief partnership there, but those two guys together, they were like, that was the ultimate 1 + 1 = 3. And I was even making the point of, well, everyone kind of even back then thought of as Chris Farley's the funny one, David Spade's like the less funny one. But even things that Chris Farley was in without David Spade, like he wasn't even close to as funny as that duo somehow working out. And it's kind of rare and it's kind of magic, but it is possible. And so when you're talking about like finding the ultimate, making it work, I'm just picturing like a Chris Farley, David Spade, where together they're both way better than even the funnier one on his own.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm laughing because throughout our show, my business partner uses a similar example. So Matt always talks about us. Have you seen the movie Twins? Do you remember that from, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, but it's Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he says that because him and I sort of sound alike and we look alike. And we get that question from clients a lot, like, are you guys brothers? And so, this is a funny movie, but he always says, we're like the movie Twins. And then the next natural question is like, well, which one's Danny DeVito and which one's like the strong muscle guy? And we try to let people figure that out for themselves. But obviously we both want to be the strong, tall, handsome muscle guy. But no, that's funny that you mentioned that. And I do think to what you said, I like to do things that are hard. Like I like to challenge myself. I like to push myself. And I think most people listening to your show feel the same way. And what's harder and what's easier? To be negative or to be positive? It's just easy to be negative right now. It's easy. Everything going on around us in the world, all the stuff that we're seeing. I mean, it's easy to be negative and it's just harder to be positive. And so for me, like choosing positivity, not in like this, what's the word I'm looking for? Not in sort of an oblivious kind of way. Like, oh, I'm just happy all the time. I'm positive. That's definitely not me. And anybody that knows me knows that. But when it comes to life decisions and trying to better yourself and building people up versus bringing people down, like I choose positivity 100% of the time. It's to me that I know it's harder to do that, but why wouldn't we all want to ultimately be that way? And so, hey man, listen, I'm negative too, but I'd rather be uplifting than be bringing someone down,
Yeah, and I understand what you mean about you're not ignorant, you're not gullible, you're making a conscious effort to be positive. And there's that saying, choose your heart, right? That, and there might be things that maybe appear to be easy up front, but then are hard later. Like, is having a budget hard? Well, maybe if you're not used to doing it, but not having a budget, if that leads you to a bad financial situation, that ends up being hard anyway. So if by the time you get to the end of each path, if both things are hard, why not choose the hard that gets you to where you need to go? Just like where it's maybe easy at first to always be negative, but then it could be hard to get yourself out of that negative pattern. So why not just be positive in the first place? So, man, we've gone over time, but that's good. It's part of the randomness of podcasting. And we want to give one last plug to Candor Path itself and to this podcast, Above Board with Candor Path, as long as anything else that you want to plug. So what do you have for us? After we listen to our conversation today, where should we be running, not walking to?
That's it, man. You know me, I'm not much of a salesman. So I think the biggest thing would be, anybody that's listening to this, I'd love for someone to listen to our show and give it a shot. It's called Above Board with Candor Path. And you can find, Candor Path Financial is the name of my company. So, I mean, you can Google us and at Candor Path is our handle everywhere. So you can find us just about everywhere with that. But we're really enjoying our show. And I think it's something fun. And at some point we got to have Mr. Robert Plank on the show.
It's a done deal. Let me know when to show up in the topic and I'm there, or even no topic and we'll figure something out.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. So we should all be going right now to candorpath.com, check out at Candor Path on social media and search that podcast Above Board with Candor Path, because if you enjoyed the randomness of John Kennedy and Robert Plank, well, soon we'll have Robert Plank as a guest, but you can even get a taste just from what John's saying about how there's all these fun topics that can make money fun for you and have less anxiety and get you where you need to go. So you listen to this podcast episode and you got this far. So why not take the next step and subscribe right now to the podcast Above Board with Candor Path, and we'll see you there. And thanks, John, for showing up today.
Thanks for having me, man. Good talking to you again.